The love that never dies. A child reunites with her children from a past life. A true story of reincarnation. Jenny Cockle woke up at 5 years old with tears in her eyes and a name on her lips. My children. Where are my children? It was always the same nightmare, or was it a memory? In the small English town where she was growing up, no child was supposed to carry the weight she felt in her chest. "Mummy, why do I dream of children I don't know?" she asked, clutching her mother's skirt. Mrs. Cockle smiled nervously, running her hand through her daughter's blonde hair. "They're just dreams, darling, they'll pass." But they didn't. Every night brought back the same images. A stone house in a distant village, the smell of bread baking, little hands reaching toward her, and always that terrible feeling of having left something unfinished, a love cut short by force. Jenny grew up carrying a burden she couldn't explain. While other children played carefree, she obsessively drew houses she had never seen, landscapes of an island that existed only in her mind or in her soul. Strangest of all was the guilt, a deep, visceral guilt that made her cry for no apparent reason, as if she had failed someone very important, as if she had left when she should have stayed. At 8 years old, staring out the window on a rainy afternoon, Jenny murmured to herself, "I was Mary, and I left them." These were the first words that gave a name to the mystery that would define her entire life. "This is ridiculous, Jenny. You need to stop with these fantasies." Dr. Peterson, the family psychologist, adjusted his glasses as he observed the 10-year-old girl before him. There was something unsettling in the clarity with which she described places and people she had never met. Jenny shook her head, frustrated. "They're not fantasies. I remember the smell of rain in that house, the sound the door made when it slammed in the wind. I remember each of my children." Her parents exchanged worried looks. They had hoped therapy would help their daughter overcome these strange memories. But session after session, Jenny only became more specific, more detailed in her descriptions. She described a thatched roof cottage by a stream, spoke of 8 children, all with specific Irish names. Dr. Peterson noted feverishly, "Far too many details for an English child who has never left her town." At night, Jenny cried in silence. No one believed her. Worse still, everyone wanted her to forget. But how could she forget something that felt more real than her present life? How could she erase the pain of having left Sonny crying in her arms, of not seeing Jeffrey take his first steps? The isolation was cruel. Jenny learned to keep her secret, to carry the weight of 2 lives alone. But the memories persisted, pulsing in her heart like a wound that would never heal. One question haunted her. If it wasn't real, why did it hurt so much? Before we continue, if you, like me, enjoy real cases of reincarnation that challenge science, subscribe now so you don't miss the next chapters. And tell me in the comments which country you're watching from. I always read them. At 25, married and with children of her own, Jenny finally found the courage to investigate her memories. Dr. Ian Stevenson, psychiatrist at the University of Virginia and a specialist in reincarnation cases, agreed to study her account with scientific seriousness. "I need you to tell me everything, in the smallest detail," Stevenson said, recorder running between them. "Names, places, dates, everything you can remember." Jenny took a deep breath. For the first time in her life, someone treated her memories as worthy of investigation, not therapy. "I was Mary Sutton. I lived in Malahide near Dublin. I had 8 children, Sonny, Bridget, Francis." The words flowed naturally, filled with emotion. She described the stone house, the garden where she grew vegetables, her husband John, who worked as a laborer. She remembered the difficult childbirth that left her weak, the fever that consumed her slowly. "I died in 1932. I was only 35, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I left my babies. The youngest was only a few months old. I never got to say goodbye." Stevenson wrote everything down, impressed by the consistency and specificity of the details, but what touched him most was the genuine pain in every word Jenny spoke. This wasn't the narrative of someone making up stories. It was the lament of a mother still mourning the children she had left behind. "We're going to Ireland," he decided. "We'll see if Mary Sutton really existed." The Dublin Records Office was dusty and silent when Jenny and Dr. E. Stevenson arrived in 1989. The clerk, Mr. O'Malley, leafed through piles of old documents with obvious skepticism. "Mary Sutton died in 1932. Malahide," he muttered, flipping through yellowed records. Suddenly, he stopped. His eyes widened. My God, here it is. The death certificate lay before them. Mary Sutton, 35 years old, deceased on October 24, 1932, from postpartum complications. Address: Cottage Lane, Malahide. Survivors: John Sutton, husband, and 8 minor children. Jenny began to tremble. The children's names, are they listed? Sonny, Bridget, Francis, Jeffrey, Christopher, Elizabeth, Philomena, and baby James. O'Malley read slowly. Each name was exactly as Jenny had said. There was no way she could have had access to this information. The records weren't digitized, rarely consulted. It was impossible for an ordinary Englishwoman to know such specific details about an obscure Irish family. Dr. Stevenson watched as Jenny broke down in tears. They exist. My children exist. It was as if a fragmented part of her soul had finally found confirmation. But the most frightening question arose. If the records confirmed Mary Sutton's existence, where were the children now? Were they still alive? Would they recognize the woman who claimed to be their reincarnated mother? The mystery deepened, and Jenny knew there would be no peace until she found her answers. The private investigator hired by Dr. Stevenson returned with news that would shatter Jenny. I found 6 of Mary Sutton's children. They still live in the Dublin area. Sonny is 65, works as a carpenter. Bridget became a nun. Francis, Jenny couldn't process it. Her children were now elderly, with entire lives built in her absence. How did they react when you mentioned Mary Sutton? She asked with a trembling voice. Interesting. The investigator consulted his notes. Sonny started to cry when he heard his mother's name. He said he never got over her death, even though he was so young when she passed. Bridget mentioned she always felt as if her mother was still around, watching over them. Dr. Stevenson observed Jenny's reaction. She was pale, holding onto her chair. They felt my presence, she whispered. More than that, the investigator continued. Christopher, now 62, told us something peculiar. Since childhood, he has dreamed of a blonde woman calling him my boy. He never knew why, since Mary had brown hair. Jenny raised a hand to her blonde hair, the same hair she had since she was born as Jenny. Could it be that the soul carried physical traits through reincarnations? Science had no explanation, but a mother's heart recognized impossible signs. The burning question was, would her children recognize her when they saw her? Sonny Sullivan, born Patrick but known by the nickname Jenny always remembered, reluctantly agreed to meet the woman who claimed to be his reincarnated mother. At 65, a retired carpenter, he carried a silent pain he had never been able to explain. I don't believe in this nonsense, he grumbled to his wife, but something in me, something wants to meet this woman. The meeting was set in a discreet cafe in Dublin. Jenny arrived first, nervous, her hands trembling as she held her teacup. Dr. Stevenson stayed nearby, observing every detail. When Sonny walked in, tall and grey-haired, Jenny felt the world stop. My boy, she murmured involuntarily. It was him. The 4-year-old she had once carried in her arms now stood before her, a grown man. Sonny froze when he saw her. His expression shifted instantly. Surprise, confusion, and something deeper. I know you, he said slowly, almost disbelieving his own words. You scraped your knee falling from the tree behind the house, Jenny said softly. I cleaned your wound with well water and sang to you until you stopped crying. The song was about a bird flying away. Sonny's eyes filled with tears. No one could have known those intimate details of his childhood. No one except... Mom, he whispered, his voice breaking. It was the moment Jenny had waited for her whole life. Word spread quickly among the Sutton siblings. Bridget, now Sister Catherine, travelled from her convent to meet Jenny. Francis, retired from the post office, brought a box of old photographs. Elizabeth, the only daughter who had emigrated to London, cancelled her appointments. If she really is Mom, Francis told the gathered siblings, she'll know things only our family could know. The test was informal, but intense. Jenny sat in Sonny's living room, surrounded by 4 of Mary's children. They asked her specific questions about their childhood, about intimate moments only a mother would know. Where did Mom hide money for emergencies? Elizabeth asked. Inside the sugar jar, in the kitchen cupboard, but not the everyday sugar. The second jar, behind the first one, Jenny answered without hesitation. Bridget leaned forward. What song did she sing when I had nightmares? Jenny began humming an old Irish tune. The words flowed naturally in Gaelic, a language she had never studied. The siblings exchanged haunted glances. Christopher, who had remained skeptical, asked the hardest question. How did Mom die? Details only she would know. Jenny closed her eyes, the pain still raw in her memory. The fever started 3 days after James was born. I knew I was dying, but I tried to hide it from you. On the last night, I called each of you to give me a kiss. You, Christopher, asked if I was going to heaven. I told you I would always be watching over you, even from afar. Christopher broke down in tears. Those were the last words his mother had ever spoken to him. James, the baby Mary had left behind, was now a 57-year-old man. Unlike his older siblings, he had no conscious memories of his mother. He was only a few months old when she died. His skepticism was absolute. "My brothers and sisters are being naive," he told his wife. "It's impossible that this woman is our mother, but I'll meet her to put an end to this farce." The meeting took place in the old family house in Malahide, now an abandoned ruin but still standing. Jenny had insisted on going there, feeling an inexplicable need to revisit the place. Walking through the empty rooms, Jenny guided the group with disturbing familiarity. The kitchen was here where you had breakfast. The girl's bedroom was there, and here, she stopped in front of a crumbling wall. "Here is where I stayed with the baby when he cried at night." James remained unmoved until Jenny knelt in a specific corner of the ruined house. "There's a metal box down here," she said, starting to dig into the earth with her hands. "I hid some things, for the future." "This is ridiculous," James muttered, but he helped dig. 15 minutes later, his hands touched metal. A small rusty tin emerged from the soil. Inside, a handwritten letter, old coins, and a small crucifix. James read the letter in silence, his expression gradually changing. It was a message from Mary to her children, written shortly before her death, expressing her love and asking forgiveness for leaving them. "How did you know this was here?" he asked, his voice breaking with emotion. Jenny smiled through tears. "Because I wrote it." Dr. Ian Stevenson meticulously documented every aspect of the Jenny Cockle case. In his office at the University of Virginia, surrounded by decades of reincarnation research, he analyzed what he considered the most compelling evidence he had ever encountered. "What makes this case extraordinary," he explained to his team, "is not just the verifiable memories, it's the emotional continuity. Jenny carries Mary Sutton's traumas and emotional bonds as if they were her own. The emerging theory was revolutionary. Consciousness might not be just memory, but also an emotional field. Unresolved traumas, especially those tied to maternal love, could transcend physical death, seeking resolution in a new incarnation. Notice the patterns," Stevenson continued, pointing to his charts. "Jenny began having memories at age 5. Around the age children develop consistent autobiographical memory. Her descriptions are more emotional than factual, focused on relationships rather than historical events." Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a consulting neurologist, offered a scientific perspective. "If we consider the theory of cellular memory, it's possible complex information could be stored beyond the physical brain, perhaps in a quantum field of consciousness." For Jenny, the technical explanations mattered less than the emotional reality. She had found her children. The emptiness she had carried for decades finally made sense. She wasn't crazy. She was fulfilling a mission interrupted by death. The question was no longer, how is this possible? But, what will the soul do when it reunites with the love that never died? The Sutton family reunion after 57 years transformed the lives of everyone involved. Jenny temporarily moved to Dublin, spending weeks getting to know the adult children, grandchildren she had never seen born, and the lives built without her. Sonny introduced her to his wife of 40 years. "This is my mother," he said simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The Irish woman, initially skeptical, quickly realized that Jenny knew family stories only a mother could know. Bridget, the nun, went through a deep spiritual crisis. "If reincarnation is real, everything I learned about life after death." Long talks with Jenny helped her expand her faith, seeing God not as a limiter, but as a facilitator of loving reunions. Francis, always practical, became obsessed with documenting family memories. "We must preserve this for history," he said, recording hours of conversations between Jenny and the siblings. He realized many gaps from his childhood finally made sense. Elizabeth struggled with conflicting feelings. She had built an independent life in London, priding herself on being a strong orphan. Accepting that her mother had returned meant acknowledging an emotional vulnerability she had always denied. Christopher, the most sensitive, found in Jenny the cure for the chronic depression that had haunted him since childhood. "I always felt something was incomplete," he confided. "Now I know what it was." James, the skeptic, became the fiercest defender of the story. "I've seen too much to deny it," he told journalists. "My mother came back to finish what death had interrupted." The culminating moment came 6 months after the first meetings. Jenny organized a special dinner in the old neighborhood where Mary had lived. She managed to bring together all the surviving children, something that hadn't happened since their mother's funeral in 1932. The table was set as Jenny remembered family meals, simple dishes, homemade candles, and the crucifix recovered from the buried box. The initial silence gradually gave way to lively conversation, laughter, and tears. "There's something I need to say to all of you," Jenny interrupted. Her voice trembled with emotion. "For 57 years I carried a terrible guilt. I felt I had failed as a mother for leaving you so young." The children looked at one another, finally understanding the depth of the pain Jenny had carried. "But looking at you today," she continued, "I see that you've become wonderful people. Sonny, you built a beautiful family. Bridget, you dedicated your life to God and to others. Francis, you were an exemplary father. Elizabeth, you became a strong and independent woman." Tears streamed freely down everyone's faces. Maybe I didn't fail. Maybe the love I left with you was enough to guide you here." Sonny stood up and embraced Jenny. "Mom, you never left us. We always knew you were with us somehow." One by one, they all rose for the collective embrace they had waited for decades. The circle was complete. Love had conquered death. 2 years after the first meetings, Jenny returned to England transformed. The guilt she had carried since childhood had dissolved, replaced by a deep peace that radiated to everyone around her. Her own children noticed the change. "Mom is different," her daughter Sarah remarked, lighter, as if a huge weight has been lifted off her shoulders. Jenny established a rotation of regular visits to Ireland. Each encounter with Mary's children strengthened bonds and healed old wounds. She became an adopted grandmother to grandchildren who welcomed her naturally, as if she had always been part of their lives. Dr. Stevenson published the case as one of the most convincing of his career. Jenny Cockle shows us that death may interrupt life, but it cannot break true love, he wrote in his final book. The case inspired thousands of people around the world. Letters arrived daily from families separated by death, finding hope in the possibility of spiritual reconnection. But for Jenny, the true triumph was not fame or scientific validation. It was in the Sundays at Sonny's house when she sat in the rocking chair telling stories to great-grandchildren. It was in Bridget's smile during her visits to the convent. It was in Elizabeth's phone calls, now more affectionate and open. "Some people ask if I believe in reincarnation," Jenny said in her last interview. "It's not a matter of believing, it's a matter of feeling. The love that binds a mother to her children does not know the limitations of death." On the night she turned 70, Jenny looked at the stars from her window in Northampton. There was no more anguish, no more searching. Her mission was complete. Love had found its way home. After learning the story of Jenny Cockle and Mary Sutton, an inevitable question echoes in our minds. Do you believe in reincarnation? More importantly, if you had a second chance to reconnect with those you love and have lost, would you have the courage to seek that reunion? Jenny's case shows us that perhaps death is not a period, but only a comma in the story of love. That true bonds can transcend time, space, and even life itself. Can you? Have you ever felt an inexplicable connection with someone you just met? Ever had recurring dreams of places you've never visited? Ever carried a nameless longing, a pain without an apparent origin? Perhaps your soul, too, is trying to tell you a story that the mind cannot comprehend.